Jamie and I are from Stone Oak International. Jamie is president, CEO, and demigoddess, and I take up all the other stuff around that. Stone Oak International has a multi-function aspect. Church and school, emergency planning and preparedness is just one sliver of it. The main focus is networking organizations together in support of churches, missionaries, evangelists, schools, orphanages, and the like, so that resources, talent, people flow back and forth. So what is this about? Well, folks, first is the success. I mentioned cause and effect relationship. The building success, it's networking, talent management, and community service. I don't care what your mission is. What your function is this. You don't have a mission. You don't have a sustained mission unless you're doing this. Unless you're doing these three things. Everything that you should be doing, mission-wise, you need to come back and look about talents, knowledge, and resources, talent management, and community service. As Christians, that's what we're about. Bringing folks along, giving them the talents, moving them into other mission ministry opportunities, whether that's still within your organization or with somebody else's organization. We shouldn't be hoarding those resources. Chapter 4 of Nehemiah did that. He comes back to Jerusalem, he makes an assessment, he gathers the clans, the families together, and he lets them know, we've got issues. I came down to build the wall. It's bigger than that. We have these external threats, and we need to build the wall. At the same time, we have to prepare for these external threats, because it will happen. He gathered the clans together. He assigned to every one of them a section of the wall to rebuild. Even the clan that didn't have any males except for the dad. Everybody else within his family group, females, had them together, and they were doing their part according to the skill sets that they had. That's talent management and networking. This community service was rebuilding the wall for the protection of Jerusalem and all of its inhabitants. And then from there, they could then expand out. Paradigms old and new. We have seen, as Brad brushed over this morning, we have seen where churches today have become more inward focused. Well, when they become inward focused and not community focused, however it is that they define their community, when they are not pushing the gospel out, when they are not being Christ outside the facility, then they are no longer a threat. And they also have no growth. They will become stagnant. Remember that we are called to spread the word. Well, calling to spread the word requires talent management, requires networking. Where do we need to spread the word? How do we get out there? And we can't successfully minister if we're confined inside the facility all the time. We come back to the facility, the walls of the church, the protections therein, to learn and grow and further develop. But we're not supposed to stay there. I'll take you to Joshua and Jericho. Who won that battle? The people with the walls that stayed on the inside? Or the folks that were external to the walls that were moving, and moving with a purpose? So our caution here is with your facility, whether that is a small church, large church, the upper room, whatever that is, be cautious. Don't get complacent and think that your ministry is only internal and bound to the walls. That's that one degree. Well, we're supposed to be external. Right. If Satan can pull you back into the confines of the walls, he doesn't have to mess with you anymore. You've done his job for him. How long have we been doing this? Since about 33 AD. We, the Christian movement. From the time of Christ on, it has been about developing the talents, developing the knowledge, and spreading the resources. All the Gospels talk about that. All the books of Paul talk about that. Paul and Silas and Timothy, they were not complacent. How many of the disciples actually died in Jerusalem? They spread the gospel out. That's the point. They weren't pulled in. The network was what they were about. And still, every one of them faced threats. We'll talk a moment on the talent management. The purpose of this again is the cause and effect, to point out we are expected to provide talent management. We, the church, expected to provide talent management to bring people up. You saw the org chart earlier. Just because someone gets put into a position doesn't mean that's a position for life. We should be developing folks and let them know, hey, you may not personally like this new position I'm putting you in. However, you're going to get the skill sets there, and then we're going to move you when the opening and timing is right into another position. So later on, you're going to be more well-rounded and better developed. And oh, by the way, don't think that you're not going to go on a missions trip. We need to get you out to see something else. Whether that's a mission trip across town to help another church. Who thinks of that these days? Across the state, onto some other community, or even around the world. Jamie and I recently came out of a church in which they had great Sunday service. It was powerful. Praise and worship was fantastic. They were growing up to about 90. They forgot talent management. Hoarded everything amongst the pastor, his wife, and a couple other folks, and then the praise and worship team. And then were surprised when attendance dropped from 90 to 60 in 1 month. And then from 60 to 20 in the next few months after that. There was no talent management. They did everything. The folks who left had skills and talents that they wanted employed, that they wanted developed, they wanted nurtured, they wanted to give out, they wanted to receive back, they wanted to be part. Instead, they were set apart and they were entertained rather than trained. On the positive side, most successful churches, they have a conscious talent development, talent succession program that also puts them at risk. The more people you send out, the more opportunities there are for trouble for those folks simply because they're doing God's work. The last part of that was the community service. Who is my neighbor? Yes. It's the look around and then go beyond. I had a discussion with a pastor a while back who said that that they had a wonderful relationship with a church in a distant country, and praise God, all of their all of their needs are met, and his church is really unsure what to do next, because that church over there, they don't need our help. Okay, great. What about the church down the street from that guy? Did you ask him that? What about the community in and of itself? What about the school? Do they have an orphanage? What other talents do you have in your own church that can now meet their community's needs? Or look around your own community. What needs do you have in around you that your own people can suffice? Oh, by the way, what needs do you have in your own church that you need somebody else coming in? I was having a discussion with a fellow that was a missionary in a local area, and they just needed hard labor. So his church put together a team of men to go do this hard labor. He wasn't a hard labor kind of guy. He was an accountant by trade. And as they filed past the office, he looked through the glass windows over there, and he saw a bookkeeper's desk with books and papers stacked because they didn't have a bookkeeper. And he stopped and asked, "What do you need more? Strong hands or someone to manage those books for you and get that straight?" No, you're here for the strong hands. Okay. So he did his work. He came back, walked past it. The lights were still off. A couple of weeks later, came back. Lights were still off. Books were even more in disarray. And he asked him, he nearly forced himself onto them, saying, "I have this talent. I invested now. Let me get your books right for you." And he applied his talents as an accountant to help them. But that's not what they thought they needed. What they thought they needed was over here when they had a valid need right here behind them that they were embarrassed or for whatever other reason unaware to even make mention of that to somebody. We've got folks with talents all over the place that can help. Our mission as a church is to send these folks. They want to be sent, whether that's down the street or around the block or around the world. This is where everybody in church should be. Here I am, send me. And we need to be honing in their skills to be able to help them do that. Because God has called them. And not called them for us to hoard. Okay. Having gone through that rather quickly, that's the cause. Because you're doing these things in your calling, developing folks, bringing them together, talent assessments, talent networking, and then the community service. You have now become a target. If you're successful at that, you've now become a target. You have reached somebody's interest, and that somebody, no doubt, is Satan. This is where this portion of our presentation gets real. Back in Nehemiah, chapter 4, verse 9. "But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat." His quotes. We prayed and we posted a guard. There are so many Christians today, so many Christian organizations that believe all they need to do is pray. That there is no need to post a guard. Oh, God will protect us. We're going to show you some of that protection later on. Yes, He will. He protected my son last night. My son is a police officer. Protected him last night when my son had to pull his weapon on somebody who had their weapon drawn. Yes. But my son is trained, and he was prepared. And he knew how to handle the situation so that nothing else erupted. All right, let me give you an example of, in Russia. Jamie's brother is a missionary in Russia. Russia is closing its doors to missionaries. Let me tell you one of the ways that it closed the door in Russia to one of his team members. Russian police showed up as the family, husband and wife, were leaving their apartment. Now they were missionaries. They had a visa. They had been doing everything that was on their visa that said that they were doing in agreement with the Russian government. Somehow bothered the local authorities and regional authorities. And after a day of interrogation, husband and wife separated inside the police station. After a day of interrogation, they finally got the missionaries to sign a document that said that they had violated their visa and they would not return to that region for 7 years. Or you can go to jail. What do you want to do? They signed it. Now, fortunately, On the Christian side, they've been doing talent management. Okay, go. Now the people who they were ministering to, rise up. Continue. It's not like the locals can leave. They don't have a visa. They live there. But that's one of the real threats. We've got a missionary team in India right now. Everything in the church is very, very quiet about the missionary team because the Indian government has become pro-Islamic, very politically correct. They don't want any of the Christian stuff going around. Otherwise, they're going to send them right out. So just church missionaries going to help a church missionary school. They can't tell anybody why they're really there doing what it is that they're really doing. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, violence can erupt. And they don't have a plan to deal with the violence should it erupt. It's just deal with it. Okay, we've got some internal threats here. Some of these folks you've seen, some of them you haven't. Some of them you may have heard about. Over on the left-hand side of your screen, ACLU, they're not a physical threat, but they are awfully intimidating. They'll take you to court in a heartbeat. Absolutely. Just to make it rough on you and discourage you. That's that next level of somebody from internal to your church whispering in your ear, you know, we need to take on this other mission activity. And that's that 1 degree off. When you pull back to true north, then expect some of these other groups to come up. That's the devil getting frustrated with you. The anarchism. Sometimes may have seen the bumper sticker with the A. Looks like that. And you wonder, what in the world is that? That's the anarchist sign. And their banner, no gods, no masters. They don't want our God. They want to put themselves as God and government as God. That's what they're really talking about. The anarchists, unified with a number of other organizations of like mind, their sole goal, published goal, is this: to create an America and Western Europe for that movement that is ungovernable. Why? So then they can offer a governing to come in and do the very thing that they're saying that we're doing. They're actually doing and want to do more of. Take away all of our freedoms. The next one over, Antifa, the anti-fascists. They claim that we're all fascists, except everything that they're doing is fascist. Where do they come from? They come out of Germany from I believe the 1920s, and they are communist. So the communists are arguing with the fascists as to who can have the most control, but watch it. Because they label something, this goes back to propaganda of the communist revolution, and then Goebbels from Nazi Germany did the exact same thing from their playbook. It is accuse your opponent of doing the very thing that you're doing, to take that attention off of you and onto them. Hey, Russia collusion. Well, who's doing what? When it's coming from that side, whatever it is that they're saying, stop and think. I bet they're probably doing it and trying to just divert blame. Below the Antifa flag is, you'll see this other emblem. I had to look at that for a while. What does that really mean? Notice the 3 arrows. Notice where they're pointing. Down and to the left. So they want a leftist focus and down. Well, kind of who do we see as down? It's kind of Satan. Opposite of where we have the cross. Our cross always up and pointing up. Next one over is the atheist. The anarchism and atheism go right together, and it goes back to communist ideology. These are internal threats to America. It is these folks that get squirrely on us, and they do these attacks on churches and whatnot. You see cars driving around, bumper stickers. I used to, when I lived up in D.C., before moving back down to Texas, used to see cars like this all the time. Really, really frustrating. Let me point some of this stuff out to you. Talking fat, picking up the pace here, because I got a couple more slides, but I wanted to hone in on this. At the 1 o'clock position, almost noon position up there next to the S, you don't need God to hope, care, to love, or to live. That's the livingwithout.religion.org. Now, notice it doesn't say Buddha, doesn't say Allah, doesn't say God. Talking to us. Next one over, we are the 99%. Who are the 99%? That's the Occupy movement. Occupy Wall Street, Occupy DC. I was living in DC when the Occupy movement came in. They were raping, robbing, vandalizing, and terrorizing downtown DC. And that's them. Go down below the Elizabeth Warren bumper sticker. Now, I'm not trying to say that Elizabeth Warren or Obama or anybody else are bad people. That's not the purpose of this. I'm just trying to show you other bumper stickers that are out there. And this one just happened to have a whole bunch of them. Believe in good. Remember we used to have a black square bumper sticker, believe in God? Yeah, not so much. Coming down, the orange and blue here at the bottom, next to the left of the 2012 sticker. That's about clean needles. The movement behind the clean needle stuff is about universal health care. Now they'll give you needles, but they'll take your unborn child. Next over to that is the coexist. I loved seeing this one. Every progressive, every leftist car that I would come across in DC that I could identify some way would have this. And I used to think, how stinking elitist of them to tell us to coexist. I want to draw your attention, we'll walk over here, draw your attention up here. Second plate down is the ichthus with the word Darwin in there, the little feet.
Yeah.
Okay, now go back to the coexist. How many religions has this person just insulted with the Darwin?
Yeah.
Okay, tell us to coexist, but then turn around and insult us.
Yeah.
This kind of individual is the kind of individual that will sit and foment hate. They're in their own echo chamber of people, riling themselves up. We're in our own echo chamber. I mean, I got to admit it. We are in our own echo chamber when we come into church. But what are we doing? We're praising God. We're saying love. They're not. They get together in their groups, their cells, their people, and talking about hate until somebody snaps and says, I'm going to go shoot me a senator. I'm going to go do something else. A school, a church, or whatever. External threats, we know they're there. They're actually here too. We've got Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Said he's got cells all over. He was the number 2 man for Al-Qaeda. He says he's got people coming in and out of the United States all the time, studying, looking at targets. What's part of the target list? Churches. Churches that are actually doing something. Not churches that are that are just holding a Sunday service, big or small. Churches that are actually doing things. That is his threat. If you don't think that the internal guys and the external guys aren't talking, the Al-Qaeda flag with the Antifa flag. I'm sorry, this is the ISIS flag with the Antifa flag. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're talking. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So now it takes us, and I've got about a minute left, the plan. What is your plan? It's the so what. So what of all that? Comes down to this. Folks, no kidding. You got to have a plan. Okay, so Al-Qaeda's not going to come knocking on your door saying, we're going to blow you up. Do you have a plan in case a tornado hits your facility? Do you have a plan if there's a fire in your facility and you have to evacuate during service? Do you have a plan if there's an active shooter? Do you have a plan if somebody comes in and just starts making threats? What is your plan? Where is it located? These are the questions that we ask when we come in. And I used to ask when I was a senior leader in the Army. I said, oh yeah, well we do that. Okay, what's the plan? Well, where is it? Who knows about it? And I would ask somebody else, hey, they got this plan. Have you seen it? Not every time. Nearly every time. What plan? What Brad was saying earlier. I have lived all of that as well. Howard Ruff's quote is spot on. Hey, it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. But he had a plan and he set about doing it and he knew why he was doing it. And he brought in his family, his grouping together. We come across as we talk this out, as we talk to other pastors and their leaders. This is what we come across quite often. We already do that. It's all too much to think about. We've got people who are police, who are military, firefighters, whatever. One of my favorites is, my dad's a cop. Oh, okay. And that makes you what? Mm-hmm. Do you learn through osmosis? At the dinner table, does he talk about what to do in your church and your environment? And then what do you do? How do you spread that out? Do you have a circle of friends who have talked about how to keep a threat out, or how to move a threat out, or what? What have you guys done? Oh no, I'll just make it up, like the Bourne Identity and the Jason Bourne things. And then God will protect us. Yes, I fully believe that, and I think it's heresy to think not. But we're going to show you some photos here of some churches and some events. Some of them you know about it, some of them you don't. Before we get into that, there were 600, according to FEMA, over 600 acts of violence in the last few years against houses of worship. Do you know that's more than what's reported at schools? How come you don't know that there's 600 in the last few years? Because we don't travel in the circles to know that stuff. In 2016, there were 246 acts of violence committed in houses of worship, leading to 65 deaths. 65. In a low year, such as 2014, there were 176 acts. We've already got to 102. The year started on 1 January with the beating death of a pastor in front of his church out in California. It ended on the 30th of December with a pastor having to pull his gun on one of his members who was being removed from church. And that member pulled out his gun and was threatening the board. No shots fired, still an act of violence. In 2014, there were 11 children killed, 4 attempted abductions, 14 murder-suicides, and one woman who intentionally drove her car into a crowd of church kids, killing one of them. Acts of violence. Oh, God will protect us. Where was God here? I think God was saying, you guys need a plan. Where's your plan? And I don't want to sound as though I'm dismissing the God will protect us thing. I fully believe in that. But I also fully believe in they prayed and prepared. They were aware. Safety and security. You'll see the picture here. That's the French priest who was stabbed in the neck in service by, I believe it was three Islamic terrorists. Notice my last sentence there. In case you didn't know, praise and worship leaders, you're the last act of defense for the pastor. Pastors love that. The praise and worship leaders know that. Just keeping with you guys on that. This was also in Europe. Every one of the naysayers, every one of the folks who delay this can always come back to, well, what's the plan? What do you want to tell them, the media or the families? This or this? We talked about it, but we never had the time. I'm still not really sure what happened, never saw it coming. God's in charge, He has higher ways. Who's going to feel comfort in that? In front of the media, in front of families, or in the courthouse, in front of the judge? Or say, we had a plan and we were prepared. Yes, but it happened. It could have been so much worse. And because we were prepared, it wasn't. God saw us through. He prepared us for just such an event. On the natural disasters, folks, they happen. On the drive up 35 yesterday, there was a building next to a church, which the church had some damage. The next building up, the roof was completely off of it. God saved the church? Yes. But I have seen churches in Tornado Alley with roofs completely off. When does that happen? On a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night? Or some other time in which there's a church activity going on. It's one thing when man asks, where's my God? And it's another when God asks, well, where was my church? It's not just about our facility. Okay, so the bad thing happens in our community. Do you have a plan to respond to your community in such an event? I have no idea if there was anybody hurt in the building whose roof came up, but did the church people come and help them? Cause and effect. We're all about rebuilding the church walls. But just like Nehemiah, if you're going to take the time to purposely rebuild the church walls, there are folks watching you. They're going to try to take you off that mission. And I was 5 minutes over. Folks, thank you so much for your time. We've got, Ms. Jamie's got business cards. If you want to reach out to us just to have a conversation, talk about a plan, do planning, drills, rehearsals, stuff like that. We've got a dynamic and very coherent, cohesive methodology that we take folks through for that. Just one of our offerings. And I can get you guys back on break.